Whereas in the book, you may pick up on some things that, wow, whereas in the... Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy. All the books that I read in October. October was a really interesting month for me because I read a crap ton of books, but the formats are kind of all over the place. I read a lot of arcs that I needed to read, and I read a lot of graphic novels, but I read a lot of like atmospheric witchy books as well, which was great because, like, if you guys watch my TBR, I was going for more atmospheric this time of year vibes. I don't do spooky, y'all know this, so I was going for non-scary spooky, and I feel like I very much accomplished that. So I have 15 books to talk to you about, so let's just get into it because we're gonna be here for a while yet again. So over the 15 books, I read 4,728 pages, which is great. And of those, I read 7 audiobooks, 1 physical book, and 7 ebooks. I told you it was weird. And of those crazy amounts of books, I read 1 middle grade, 11 YA, 1 new adult, and 2 adult books. My genres were pretty contained as well because I read 12 fantasy, 2 contemporary, 1 nonfiction, and 1 classic. And my star ratings were also pretty contained because I had 1 5-star, 10 4 stars, and 4 3 stars. So let's just get into the first book that I read. So I started off the month with a very atmospheric fall book, and that was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow.ROWELL, but it was also illustrated by Faith Erin Hicks, and I gave this one 4 stars. This was such like a super cute fall story. This was really popular, I think, last year, because I think it came out last year, and I didn't ever get around to it, and it was just so cute. It was real cute. So it's very short, obviously, because it's a graphic novel, so that made it really kind of tropey. It was very predictable. It's about these 2 kids who are seniors in high school, and it's their last Halloween at home before they go off to college, and it's their last Halloween at this pumpkin patch they've worked at for literal years. And it's really predictable. It's super, super cute, but it's real cheesy and real predictable. Because it's so small, but it was perfect to start off my month with because it really got me in the autumnal mood. I don't really know what else to say about it because there was not a whole lot of substance to it because it is so short, but there's a lot of rep in it as well, which I really appreciated. The last thing I will say about this is I loved the art style. This is the type of art style that I like. It was very colorful. It was incredibly beautiful. It is more on the cartoon side, but I do not mind that. That's just kind of the style it was, and it was gorgeous. So like, I would have just read it for the artwork alone, but like the story did have some cuteness to it. So I started off my month with a very cute fall read. And I followed that up with Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin, which I did end up giving 4.5 stars to. This one was good. I enjoyed my time reading it. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I read last year, but I also read it last month just to remind myself what happened for it. And this one was good. It was just not as good as the first one. I think the thing that I liked the most, or the thing that I've noticed the most that was the most difference, was that in the first book, it's all about our 2 main characters, Lou and Reed. Lou is a witch and Reed is a witch hunter, and due to weird circumstances, they have to end up getting married. And Reed obviously doesn't know that Lou is a witch, and so it's shenanigans galore. That one is very focused on the romance part of it, which I loved. I loved their romance. I thought it was amazing. This one is less focused on it because they've already like established what's happening between them. So this one is more of like they're on the road, they're dealing with what's happening in the world and the repercussions of what happened in the first book. And so they can use magic more because they're in different places. Whereas in the first book, Lou was so focused on containing herself that she didn't never really use magic. So we do get to see the magic system more, specifically the blood magic system. So if cutting is a trigger warning for you or self-harm or something like that, just be wary because that's basically what that entire magic system revolves around, and so it can get really gruesome at times. But I think I loved their romance so much so that the fact that like we didn't see it as much in this book hindered my enjoyment of it. It was also kind of a travel-y book where they were traveling from one place to the other, and I really have noticed that those are not the books that I tend to gravitate towards. Like, in theory they sound great, and then I read them and I'm bored most of the time. So I think that's why I didn't like this one as much. However, there's like huge things that happen at the end, and it was a much bigger plot twist, and not plot twist, but plot cliffhanger than the first one. So I cannot wait to get my hands on the third one, whenever that happens, probably next year sometime. So it was still really good. It still got 4.5 stars from me, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in this book, which obviously I can't tell you about, that was good, especially the very, very end. But it just wasn't as good as the first one, in my opinion. So the next book is my 5-star read. It's my favorite book of the month, and it was my nonfiction pick. I'm shocked. And that was The Rival Queens by Nancy Goldstone. This is a historical, just kind of like exploration of Catherine de Medici, who was the Queen of France. And if you know really anything about French and like monarch history, Mary Queen of Scots married into her family, so Catherine was her mother-in-law for a hot second. And then it also follows Catherine's youngest daughter, Marguerite, and it's just their story about how they really didn't get along and why that is. And I thought this was incredible. I think Nancy Goldstone is an absolutely fabulous writer because she breaks it down so that you're learning what's happening. Like, I've learned so much about these people that the only thing that I knew about them was what I learned from Rain, and the only one that was actually in Rain was Catherine de Medici, which is a great show, very historically inaccurate, but still a great show. And so I wanted to know more, and this sounded so good, and she just writes it so well because it doesn't feel like a dry history book. It feels like she's broken it down to where it's very digestible. You're learning about people. She makes jokes throughout the book about how like everyone has the same names. And I also really appreciated that throughout this book, there is definitely some like moments when you're not sure what happened, and so she'll like explain, well, this is what, here are the two things that historians are split on. They think either this happened or this happened for this specific situation, and she'll like explain both sides. She'll say, I think it was this thing, but I'm going to explain all of the history. I'm going to give you all of the facts and what a lot of historians are thinking about X, Y, and Z. And I really appreciated that. It was just so digestible. It was very fun. It took me forever to get through this book, but it wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it, obviously. It was because I wanted to focus on only this, so I made sure I read this or listened, because I had an audiobook of this. I read and listened to this only when I could like put all of my attention towards it. So it took me a while to get through this, but I loved this book. It was so good. And I have now since decided that I want all of Nancy Goldstone's historic books. Not all of them, but almost all of them, because she writes about people who are so interesting. And I think she was great. I think she was an incredible writer. I think this is but the word for this is digestible. It's not dry. It's interesting. It's a historical book, and it's all based on reality, but it feels like a fictional tale because it actually has intrigue and a plot and like, you know, like that kind of stuff, but it's all about real people. I don't know, it was great, but I think she just made this incredible, and I literally didn't want to do anything else but read this. So like half of the month I was reading this and doing nothing else because it was great. It was so good. The next one that I picked up was The Grim Grotto by Lemony Snicket, which is the 11th in the series of unfortunate events. I'm getting so close to the end, and I did end up giving this one 4 stars. Again, like in all of the past months, I do not know what to say about this book because I feel like my feelings for the series have been the same the entire time. We learned a lot more about their personal history, the overarching plot in this one, which was really great. We've only got 2 more books left, and I need to know what's gonna happen. But it was fun. I liked the adventure. It had a very similar plot structure to some of the past books, so it's starting to fall into that plot structure a little bit, but we got a lot of answers that we haven't been getting before, and I'm excited for the next one. like I legit don't know what to say. Go watch like all reviews of all past books because this is a great series. I really enjoy it. It was good. I gave 4 stars to. So the next book that I ended up picking up was Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. This is the 3rd in her Wayward Children's series, and also unfortunately the last one that I own, so obviously I need to get my hands on the rest of them, but I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This one takes place back at the boarding school that we went to in the very first book, where all of the kids from different worlds come, like Alice in Wonderland, who go through the looking glass and then come back. Looking glass? Rabbit hole. You know what I mean. It goes back to that boarding school, but then it also does dive into a bunch of different worlds from there. This one definitely had more of a like plot line than the first 2 did. I felt like the first one had a murder mystery plot line, so like it was somewhat of a plot line, but the second one was just kind of like giving you the backstory on a couple of people, so there wasn't really like a legit this is what's happening in it, whereas this one, it definitely felt like they had a goal to reach by the end of it. Now with that being said, the pacing was still great. I'm still baffled by how she can do this because these books are so tiny. How can you have an entire plot line and an entire story and still be able to not rush through it? Like, it's incredible. And we got to see new characters, we got to see some old characters, so it was mingling of people that we'd already known and people that we were, you know, introduced to for the first time. There is lots of rep in this, like there always is, which I really appreciated. It was just really good. I love that we got to see a bunch of different worlds because due to some of the events, there's like a group of kids that basically plops in and out of like 3 or 4 different worlds that some of these characters are from, and so you got to see some worlds that were described to you in the first one but like you didn't actually get to see because they were at the boarding school, or some worlds that like you'd only barely heard about, some that you'd never heard about. It was just so incredible that you got to see all of these worlds, and they were all so unique and so different, and yet all felt so real. I don't know how she does it. I love her writing so much. Oh, it was good. So the next book that I picked up was The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This is a review copy that I received from NetGalley. It came out in October, so it's out now. If you would like to get your hands on it, I will leave my Goodreads review down below if you want to see more coherent thoughts on this, but I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is basically a story of Regency England, but if you included witchcraft. Or not witchcraft, but like magic. If magic was part of the world, and men can continue to be magicians their entire life. Women, however, once they get married, they basically give up their magic because there's something about magic and pregnancy that doesn't quite go along. So if you have magic and you get pregnant and have a kid, your kid is like a free spirit and is really hard to contain and is really dangerous, basically. I thought it was interesting because it's set in a world where women are oppressed anyway, because Regency England, women have no rights, and you put magic on top of that. And I think because it's set in a real historical place, and it is, they're already being oppressed as women anyway, that just made this world so much richer and so much more believable because it was based on actual history. I thought the plotline was incredibly creative. The entire magic system that this woman has created was incredibly amazing. I loved it. The one issue I did have was that the magic system was confusing at times. There were times where our main character and one of her new friends that they talk and practice magic together were doing so, and she's kind of like teaching her friend some stuff, and the way that it's described really fast, and then like you're just expected to automatically now know. It's like the author was relying on you just to believe anything, and it wasn't explained as well as I wanted it to. So a lot of the times when like things were happening, I was real confused as to what was going on and why they were doing X, Y, and Z, but overall I still thought it was great. That's why I got 4 stars instead of 5 stars, but I thought it was incredible. The ending I was a little questionable about because there were some characters that all of a sudden have had thoughts and have had ideas, and like this is who they are through the entire book, and at the very end they just switched magically their opinions on stuff, and I was like, that is not how that works. So like there are some people that did things at the very end of the book that I was like, No. But really that was my only problem with it, because I just thought it was really creative, and I legit kind of want to get my hands on a finished copy because I actually really enjoyed this. It's very atmospheric for this time of the year because it's so witchy. One thing that I absolutely loved about this book is that the main character meets this brother and sister, and like that's who she becomes really close with, and they are like the richest of the rich during this time. They are the people that everyone wants to be after. They are the people that everyone wants to marry. And they are POC main characters. So like it's only mentioned as like a descriptor of like, so you can picture what they look like. They're from a different continent, I think, or a different island. So like they are not from England, but no one bats an eye at the fact that they are not white. And I thought that was amazing to have that, especially in a place like Regency England that is so set in history, that is so set in like white is the only way to go, that I really liked how she did that. That's coming from obviously a white lens, so bear in mind that, but I just really wanted to mention that because I thought that was a very interesting thing to do. I really enjoyed this book, so if you like witchcraft set in Regency England, I highly recommend. I followed that one up with a 3-star read, and that was The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't have any explanation as to why I didn't enjoy this book. I was listening to the audiobook by Rob Inglis, which I love him. He's an amazing audiobook narrator. I loved everything that I've read by him. I think I listened to The Hobbit by him, and I'm also pretty sure that he did the Mistborn audiobook that I listened to earlier this year. This was just like boring. I like spaced out so much during this, and it is a journey story, so like maybe I should have known going into this that it wasn't even my favorite, but I've seen all the movies, so I know like the general idea of the series. I really enjoyed the movies. I think this world is so incredibly creative, and I love the story of The Lord of the Rings. I just don't think I like the execution of it. I think after reading this, I've had like a heart-to-heart with myself, and I think classic fantasy writing is not for me. I don't think I enjoy it. I think because I feel disconnected from the characters. I feel like the author is just telling us these things that have happened, and there's no threat of danger, there's no connection to these people. You just feel like things are happening, but like they're over there. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna put off reading the other two quite yet, just because like I do want to read them, and I'm not sure if watching the movies first when I was younger like hindered my enjoyment of this book. I don't know, but like it wasn't until about halfway through this book that I actually started to care a little bit, and then I just wanted it to end. So like maybe it's a mixture of like writing isn't for me, and also I spaced out a lot, but I didn't love it. It was okay. It was very middle of the road. I didn't hate it, not at all, but I also didn't love it. So it's like, this is the perfect 3-star read for me because it's very middle of the road. I don't know what to think about it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It's just there. One thing that I did for sure appreciate about this book was the timeline. So I've noticed that in other books, sometimes when they're traveling, they somehow magically complete their journey within like 2 or 3 weeks. That does not happen. This takes months and months for them to do literally anything, and I appreciated that because that felt so realistic, and I really wish people would do that more instead of just saying, oh, they've magically gotten from point A to point B in 2 weeks, even though all these things happened. Whereas this one, they were like, nope, okay, we gotta wait for a couple of months before these things happen, and then we'll start on our adventure, but it's gonna take us another month to get over this hill or this mountain, and then it's gonna take us another month to be here, and then we're gonna stay there for like a week or two, and then like it just felt realistic. And I appreciated that. So like there are things that I liked about this book. I just my overall feelings are very middle of the road. The next one that I ended up picking up was The Boundless by Anna Bright, which is the sequel to The Beholder, which I read in August. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I did appreciate that there's only 2 books, so this is the end of that series. So if this sounds interesting and you really want a short series, I highly recommend. This one's going to be hard to talk about just because it is a sequel and like a huge things happens at the end of the first book that like sets off literally all the events of this one. The first one does follow our main character, who I can never seem to pronounce her name correctly. Celia, I think is how you say it. And she is the ruling party of her home, which is in a like reimagined version of North America. And so her stepmom really doesn't like her, and so she sends her off to basically get married. And that's kind of the whole point of the first book. And this is what happens after it. What I did appreciate about this one is I was really worried that I wasn't going to remember much from the first one. I remembered the major plot points, but I didn't remember a lot of the characters from the first one. But I think she does a really good job of layering them in, and if you're confused on who someone is, just give it like a sentence or two, because she's gonna kind of say something that will remind you, oh, that's the guy or girl who did X, Y, and Z. So I really appreciated that. This is super action-packed. There's a lot of stuff that I want to say about this, but I can't because spoilers. This is not a great review of this because I literally cannot tell you anything about this book. It's a series that I feel like is really fun while you're reading it, but is very forgettable once you're done. So I have a feeling that like even by like the middle of next year, I will not have remembered a lot of the things that are in this book. But I did really love getting into this world. I really appreciate that there's only 2 books. I felt like this one wrapped up in a very believable way, which I did appreciate. So it was very good, and I gave it 4 stars. And then let's get into some of the graphic novels that I decided to do. So the next one that I read was Northanger Abbey graphic novel by Nancy Butler and Janet Leigh. Nancy Butler was the author and Janet Leigh was the illustrator. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, mostly because like the artwork was very beautiful. I did appreciate the artwork, but this one was just okay. I think my biggest problem with this is, obviously, I've read Northanger Abbey. I know about that book. It's probably one of my favorite Jane Austens. It's up there as far as Jane Austens go. It obviously had to move a little fast because it was a graphic novel, but there are characters in this book that you don't know are bad or not so great for the main character until about halfway through, if not later. And this is written as like those characters are bad from the beginning. Our main character, Catherine, basically is super naive, doesn't really know anything, has lived on a farm her entire life, but her next door neighbors, the Allens, are super rich, and they go to Bath and basically invite her to come along with them. So she does, and she meets some friends, she meets some men, she has some feelings. She likes to read a lot, so this is a joke on like graphic literature at the time, and she's really like, she's got an amazing imagination where she imagines all of these manors have all of these like secrets in them. I would go and read the original before reading this graphic novel. I don't think it's as, I mean, I feel like you could get the idea of what the story is about, but there's a lot to it that the graphic novel didn't depict the right way, in my opinion. For example, like I said, the people who were supposed to be quote-unquote bad. Also, the ending really annoyed me because there's a whole thing with the love interest's father, and he just 180s basically at the end of this graphic novel, which is not what happens in the book, and that really bothered me. It was an interesting retelling. I liked the artwork. I'm glad I read it. There's quite a few graphic novel versions of the Jane Austen books that I found on Hoopla, so I think I'm going to continue with those, but because it was gothic, I felt like this was a good time of the year to read it, and it just kind of fell a little flat for me. The next one I read was Witchy Volume 1 by Ariel Slammet Reese. This is set in a world where, depending on how long your hair is, that's how much magic you have. So if you've got short hair, your magic is not so great. If you have long hair, your magic is out the wazoo. But sometimes if you have too long hair, then you're dangerous and basically burned. And it follows our main girl whose father had too long hair and was burned. This is a first volume, which I didn't realize going into it. The artwork was really pretty. I loved the world. I thought the magic system was incredibly creative. I thought that was very interesting. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because it was good. Like, I didn't absolutely love it. It wasn't my favorite thing that I have ever read, but it wasn't terrible. It was good. It was very middle of the road for me. I liked a lot of stuff about it. There's like a whole like fighting against the government kind of situation that's going on, so like that seemed a little predictable, but I'm curious to see when and if we get more volumes, what those will be like. I'll probably give them a try but it was very good. It was very middle of the road. I appreciated it, but it wasn't the most amazing thing ever. The next book that I ended up reading was Ink by Alice Broadway. This is the first in a trilogy, I want to say, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I actually really liked this story. Basically, this takes place in a world where people have lots of tattoos, and their tattoos mean something for them, and they are tattooed their entire life. If big things happen in their life, they get a tattoo for it. If you get married, you get a tattoo for that. Once you are born, you get like a birthmark tattoo. So like you have tattoos all over yourselves, and then when you die, your tattoos are collected in what they call a skin book, which I didn't realize until after starting reading, and it was kind of creepy, where basically they take your skin and make a book out of it so you can see all the tattoos and like read this person's life story. And then you are weighed based on your tattoos if you are good or bad. If you're good, your book is taken home and you are remembered and you are placed with all of the ancestors, and your book is basically like carried down for generations to come. If you have specific tattoos that show that you were a bad person, your book gets burned and you were forgotten. And it's a very interesting world. I liked the idea of the tattoos sharing someone's life story. The skin books really kind of freaked me out a little bit, mostly because this follows our main character Leora, whose father dies at the very beginning of the book, and so she and her mother go to like look at his book once his book has been created, and they're talking about like, I don't know, like they're touching his shoulder and like they know it's his shoulder, but like it's the tattoo that's on his shoulder. It was a little creepy, I'm gonna be honest. The actual books kind of freaked me out, but the idea of this world was very fascinating, so I was able to get over that. But what I found the most interesting about this book is that the plot line is written like it's a dystopian, but it's set in like a fairy tale fantasy world, which is like so bizarre, but like that's the feelings I got. And the writing is so atmospheric that you are picturing everything. It's very well written. I really like this writing style, so obviously I'm going to continue with this series because like I need to know what's going to happen, because the ending was wow. But there's just there's a lot with this book. I did find fascinating, and this might actually be a spoiler, but I definitely want to mention it, so I'm gonna put like a little thing on the screen that says like, if you don't want to know spoilers from this book, wait until that goes away. But basically this is set, like I said, in like a dystopian world where the government is not so great, and our main character is discovering that throughout this book. What I really appreciated is that in the end, when like there's the big reveal and most people would go the opposite way and go, oh, the government's bad, she's been taught so much about what she thinks that she believes that it's really hard for her to just automatically say, nope, government is bad, but like she has to have like legit conversations with herself on whether or not it's good or not, because she has been tailored to believe these specific things, and it's going to be hard to unlearn those specific things, which I really appreciated because I felt like that was very realistic for someone who has believed something their entire life for many generations before them, and they are just now discovering that maybe that was wrong. So to unlearn the stuff that they have learned, it's gonna be real difficult. It was very good. I highly recommend if you are interested in like a dystopian fantasy world, but it has to do with tattoos, and also like she is learning to be someone who inks people, so like you've got her learning that as well. It's fascinating. I really enjoyed this book. The next book is another ARC that I got from NetGalley that is definitely out now, so you can go get your hands on it, and that is Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. Now, Ashley Poston is actually an author that I really enjoy. She wrote Heart of Iron, which I freaking love, and she's written all of those like Geekarella books that are really popular, so I'm sure you've heard of her. This is a fantasy story set in a small town in the middle of the woods, and the woods are supposed to be really dangerous and really bad, and the ruling class family, whoever they are, has a crown, and that crown gives them the ability to protect where they are from the forest, which is not so great. This gave me a lot of the same feelings as The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones did, because it has people kind of coming back from the dead, and there is a lot of There's a lot of body horror in this book. There's a lot of gruesome moments within this book. So like, I do not like body horror. So that was a little rough to go into. So just be wary of that. I will also leave my Goodreads review down below for this one as well, if you want better thoughts on it than what I'm about to say. But I did end up giving it 4 stars. I thought it was very interesting. I thought the writing was incredible because it was so atmospheric. Like, that's the word of this video, is she made you believe that, like, you could see the woods, you could see her, you could see the town that she was in, you could see all of these like creatures that were coming from the woods. It was real bizarre. So the plot itself was very basic. Like I said, it reminded me of the Bone Houses a little bit in the way that it felt. It didn't sound like it was going to be anything super original, but I think Ashley Poston has an amazing way of creating a world and creating characters that you care about and you didn't realize you cared about until the end. And you're like, oh wow, I was really connected to those. So I read this book in one day because I just couldn't stop. I can't explain to you why it worked for me, but it did. It did. If you like creepy woods stories where like a main character has to go through the woods to like figure out how to solve this big curse thing because some things are not exactly what they seem, this is the book for you. But the writing was actually my favorite part about this. I did enjoy the characters, but the writing was fabulous, and it was good. I gave it 4 stars, so thumbs up from Kelsey. The next one I decided to pick up was MONSTRESS Volume 2, because this is a like steampunk horror graphic novel series that I do own the first one of. I didn't really know what I was getting into when I read the first one, and I was running out of things to read, and I still had a few days left of the month. So I decided to give the sequel a try. It got 3 stars from me. I was still really confused by most of this world, and I don't know if it's just because I missed some of the world building from the first book. I don't know what it was. We did learn a lot about our main character's backstory, so I do feel like we learned quite a bit. I honestly don't have that much to say on this one because it's a sequel. It was good. I felt meh about it most of the time. Like, I was really confused and I wasn't sure what was going on. And you're like expanding the world and learning about our main character's mother a little bit more, which was fine. It was okay. Like, I don't really know how to explain it. It was just okay. Will I continue the series? Who knows? I'm not in love with the story. I'm not in love with the characters. The main character really annoys me. Like, she's so rude to people who are trying to help her. And I realize that she has been basically like molded as she's grown up to be like that because the world is super dangerous for her. But she's so mean to the people who are trying to help her, and she drives me crazy. So I don't think I'll ever buy any more graphic novels. Honestly, I probably will unhaul the one that I have. But the artwork is gorgeous, and I love the artwork, but it is so gruesome. And it's real weird. Like, it's the weird side of horror where like things are happening and you're like, I am uncomfortable with what's going on. It was confusing. It was okay. It got 3 stars. Maybe I'll read more. Maybe I won't. Honestly, I have no idea. And then I finished and finally read Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron. This one got 4 stars from me. This one was great. This is a kind of retelling of Cinderella. It takes place 200 years after Cinderella has died, and it's in this very, very oppressive world where the women are required to go to balls where they are selected by men to be wives, and it's only ever like straight couples. There is no LGBT couples in this community. But it follows our main character Sophie, who's actually in love with her best friend Erin and does not want to go to balls and basically just wants to run away and live her life because like she's tired of being oppressed basically. And they use the story of Cinderella, or the king uses the story of Cinderella as like this put on a pedestal. This is the perfect world. Cinderella would want you to be going to balls and want you to be selected by men and be a good wife who is quiet and just does what her husband says. So like the story and like the reimagining and like the twists and turns that they have taken on the actual Cinderella story, I really appreciated. I thought the writing was very well done. I thought the characters were very well done. My only problem that I had with this book was that because it's set in this world where like men are everything and women are basically property, and it's just like it's uncomfortable. Like there's definitely trigger warnings for abuse within this book, because there's some moments when women are being abused by their husbands because they can, and like no one's gonna step in their way to fix it. It was just very exhausting and tiring to read. Did this hinder my enjoyment? It did not. It made me uncomfortable. It made me very angry for most of this book, but I kind of feel like that's the author's point, where it's like, while you're reading this took me forever to read. This was the one physical book that I read, and it took me the entire month to read because I could only do it in like small chunks because the oppression was so much, and it really like exhausted the reader. But with that being said, that's probably what the author was going for. This is my interpretation of it. This is probably what the author was going for, because imagine living that world. Imagine being a woman in this world. It's gonna be tiring to live your life every single day. So like, I get that. It was a lot. It was very heavy-handed, and sometimes I just needed to take a break. But it was still really good, and I still really enjoyed it, and I liked that this was just a one standalone fantasy book. I really appreciated that. I also appreciated that there are quite a few main characters and characters within this book that are POC, and it's just like, it doesn't have to do with anything except for that like it's how they're described. Like every other book, when you describe a character, you're going to describe what color their hair is, what texture their hair is, what color their eyes are. They do the same stuff, and it just so happens that a lot of the characters in this village are POC characters. It definitely gave the story a different look than we have seen in the past, but it also was like not part of the plot at all. It was just like, these are what these characters are, because that makes them human. Let's move on. It was good. I loved it. I loved it a lot, and the love story in this one was perfect. It was great. I recommend, but it might take you a while to get through it, but I recommend. And the very last book that I read in the month of October was Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Yu, I think is how you pronounce that. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. The artwork is gorgeous. I loved the artwork in this book. My problem with this book is that the title and cover are very misleading. This book is about a witch and a werewolf defeating a demon. Like, that's basically the point of this book. It reminds me a lot of The Witch Boy by Molly Ostertag, but the cover and the title are mooncakes, and on the cover they're cooking. Literally not part of the plot at all. Mooncakes are mentioned like once, and it's just in passing, and it's part of like a big feast that they're throwing. Literally it. I don't understand why the title and the cover were the way that they are, because it made it look like it was about witchcraft and cooking, which sounded great, but it's not. Not even in the slightest. So should I have maybe read the synopsis before going in? Maybe. But like, I still feel like it should have been titled something different, and that the cover should have been something different, because like, it's incredibly misleading. But there is a lot of really good rep within this book, because our main characters, the witch has hearing aids, and so I don't know if she is fully deaf, but she's for sure has hearing aids and can't hear very well. And I also believe that she is bi. It's never quite stated, but it is mentioned that she likes both girls and guys at different points within this book. The other main character is, I believe, non-binary. Again, it's never directly mentioned that they are or not, but they do use they, them pronouns, and that is mentioned quite a bit. So there is a lot of really good rep within this book, and the love story between our main characters is just amazing. It moves real fast because it's a graphic novel, but it's not like it comes out of nowhere. There was definitely history between these two characters from before the graphic novel, which I appreciated. So it wasn't just like, hey, like their love story came out of nowhere. No, like it's been built for years. So I appreciated that. But this was just a fun book to like finish the month on, a little witchy story about some demons and weird things like that. But it was fun. I gave it 4 stars. Okay. That's it. Those are the 15 books that I read in the month of October. Please let me know down below. Let's chat if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if there's a book that you read in October that was so incredible that you just need to rave about. Or if you want to rant about something, that works too. But that's all I have for you guys today. I very much hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there if you want to follow along on any of those. And I will see you guys in my next video.